Berlin was home, and I loved it. When the time came to leave, it would be difficult for me, even though I knew that going home to America was the right thing to do. I did go to Heidelberg University for a year after I graduated from American Independence High School of Berlin. And Heidelberg was educational for me, but I can't say it was all academic. They have this strange system in European colleges. They don't take attendance at the classes. They insisted on signing me up for beginning German, even though I spoke German fluently, having been in the country for almost 6.5 years. So when I got to the German classes, I found I was in with all sorts of non-Germans, many of them Americans, who did not speak German, and I was greatly in demand as an impromptu translator. So I would write a running translation of the professor's lecture as she spoke for the fellow American students. And then they started taking me to their classes, their other classes that I wasn't enrolled in. And I went to things like Russian history, European military history, pre-med, pre-law, you name it. There was always some fellow American student who didn't speak German who was happy to have me go to class with him or her. So it was educational. But I have to admit, I greatly neglected my own classes, and I must have been a great frustration to the German teacher because my spoken German was clearly Berlin accented, filled with Berlin idioms, and typical Berliner grammatical mistakes. Today, when someone asks me, what did you learn from Berlin and the Berliners, I'm hard-pressed to answer. I learned so much. I can't begin to tell it all. But to sum it up, when I first went there, it was foreign and strange to me. I was afraid of the city and the citizens. And by the time I left, it was home. And I felt myself to be one of them. I had the feeling that I too was a Berlinerin, a citizen of Berlin. And I've never lost that feeling. For in my heart, it's the home of my youth, the home I love. My life has always been about adventure. When I came back from Berlin for the last time in 1953, it was at a time when the East German uprising had just begun. On our last day in Berlin, my mother and I stood on our side of the Brandenburg Gate and looked through the gate where we could see the fighting. When I got home to America, new adventures awaited me, adventures of a different sort. Falling in love, getting married, having children, raising children, and finally entering into widowhood with the death of the husband I always felt was my soulmate. It's been a wonderful adventure, and I wouldn't have missed a minute of it. I wouldn't change places with anybody in the world. I'd still always rather be me. I've told my story about growing up in Berlin before, during, and after the blockade in my book, Marion's Child, A Lifetime of Adventure. It follows the memoir I wrote about my mother, Marion. Both of these are published by Westview, and both of these may be found through the published by Westview website or through my website, www.laurelsteinhice.com. I have some more publications in mind after this. Currently, I'm writing a weekly column called Pages of the Past, a historical column, drawing on the excellent material my mother left, photographs, documents, books, memorabilia. And I'm also planning a series of books called Woman on the War Beat about my mother's life, leading into World War II, during World War II, and this will feature some extremely historical photographs. I don't know whether those photographs are all available elsewhere other than our collection or not. I know some of them are available in resources such as the Bettman Archive, because I've seen credits on their published photos and such. I don't know whether we have anything unique or not. Right now, it's a new adventure for me, finding out more about the fabulous collection my mother left us. My children and I celebrate her legacy and look forward to more books, more articles, DVDs, you name it. We look forward to exploring more of my mother's legacy in the future. Forward. I consider myself fortunate to have been born in America in 1936. I have lived in interesting times. In my lifetime, World War II, the Cold War, the Korean conflict, and the Vietnam War have come and gone. The Gulf War has come and gone as well, although our nation is at this writing involved in conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq, to say nothing of a global war on terrorism. Presidents, projects, and fashions have passed through our world, each in its own slice of historical context. Television and computers have come into our lives and show no signs of passing out of favor. Nylon, penicillin, plastics, and microchips have been invented. The atomic age has come upon us, and men have walked on the moon. In the year of my birth, a civil war was waged in Spain. King George V of England died and was succeeded by his son, King Edward VIII, who abdicated a few months later to marry the woman he loved. In America, Bruno Richard Hauptmann was convicted of kidnapping and killing the Lindbergh baby, and a great flood wiped out Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Henry Luce began the publication of Life magazine, and Boulder Dam was completed on the Colorado River in Nevada and Arizona. Franklin D. Roosevelt was elected to a second term as president. Popular songs that year included the Whiff and Poof song, Pennies from Heaven, and I'm an Old Cowhand from the Rio Grande. On the international scene, the ocean liner Queen Mary won a prize for crossing the Atlantic in 3 days, 23 hours, and 57 minutes. Germany occupied the Rhineland, and Italy annexed Ethiopia. Hitler and Mussolini proclaimed a Rome-Berlin axis, and the stage was set for a Second World War. When war came to America, I was too young to fight in it, but old enough to understand something of what was going on, and old enough to retain clear memories of the remarkable wartime and post-war experiences that would shape my life. In my lifetime, the world has grown dramatically smaller. Today's Americans would be hard-pressed to isolate themselves culturally, economically, or intellectually from the influences of other nations. Our marketplace abounds with foreign goods. New waves of immigration have followed those which shaped our history and population in earlier times. Foreign nationals and Americans of diverse ethnic heritages are participants in every sector of our society today. Alaska and Hawaii have graduated from their previous status as territories to become full member states of the United States of America. Many of us travel abroad routinely on business or for pleasure. Technological advances in many fields, notably those of communications, have given us increased and enhanced awareness of the rest of the world and its peoples. News of faraway places and events has long been available to those who sought it in books and newspapers, but television and the internet have brought us a much more personal and graphic view of, among other things, lives and customs unlike our own. It was a very different situation, however, just after the end of World War II, when I first went to Europe. At that time, our nation stood proudly victorious at the end of one terrible era, and moved forward with confidence toward a new age that was to prove more challenging than most of us foresaw. Members of the United States occupation forces of Germany and Japan, together with their families, diplomatic families, and the staffs of other officials or private U.S. agencies abroad, were among the first ordinary Americans of modest means to travel extensively or to settle at length in other countries. Prior to that time, those privileges had been enjoyed primarily by the wealthy. As a child of 10, I was among the first U.S. dependents into Germany after the war, and arrived in Berlin at a time when living conditions there and throughout much of Europe were still very bad.